right, good evening, everyone. Looks like it is all a family affair tonight. I don't think you need these. So, probably would be no surprise to a lot of you who've gotten to know me a little bit better, but I am both a homebody and an introvert at the same time. Means I like to be at home a lot. I don't feel the need to go places. My wife is not like that. I can stay in the house for weeks. Eventually, I do need to walk around outside. And I can get my battery drained by a lot of social interaction, and I need recharge time. If I'm not mindful about that, I can slide into things like isolation, or not wanting to connect with people because it seems too hard. And so one thing that I have to be really conscious of doing is regularly reaching out to other people. I actually have people that I reach out to every single day. It's just kind of a thing because I know that I have that tendency. But I found in my own life that reaching out and connecting with other people can be extremely fulfilling. And even if I do get tired, opening up our lives and our homes to others is a good thing to do. And so tonight I want to talk about that, and really the word that we usually use is hospitality. So I want to talk about this idea of hospitality. And we'll talk more in particular about what that actually means, because a lot of us might have assumptions about that aren't actually reflected in Scripture. But opening up our lives and our homes is sometimes uncomfortable and even scary. We don't want to have people there. We feel vulnerable. Maybe we don't know them so well. It can be awkward. But it's a good thing to do. You know, I can find myself sometimes we have someone coming over and I think, oh man, that's just hanging over my head all day because I have to talk to people and I have to do all of these things, and never once have I ever regretted it. Well, maybe, but I don't remember. But it's always a good thing. I want to talk about that. So it might be scary sometimes. It might be uncomfortable, but as we'll see, being hospitable, and again, try to expand your definition as you're thinking about that in your mind. Being hospitable is encouraged and even expected of God's people, if you look at the New Testament. It's a mark of thriving Christians, if you look further. And so, with that in mind, I actually want to take this a step further, and this is going to be our focus tonight, that when we understand the reasoning or the thought process behind the expectation of hospitality, we can utilize it as an opportunity for evangelism. And so this quarter we've been talking about different ways of shining our light and how to do that. And so tonight I want to talk about this idea of hospitality as an opportunity to shine our lights. And so the big idea for us, the main thing, is that hospitality is an expected way of life for Christians, and it's a great way to shine the light of the gospel to those around us. But the first thing that we have to understand is, what does the concept of hospitality mean in the New Testament? And so we have to talk about that. So words for hospitality directed toward Christians, I believe there's only one time when it's used of a non-Christian, but directed towards Christians, it's used 6 times in the New Testament. There's a couple different words, and of the main word that's used, it's 3 times used as an adjective describing someone being hospitable, and then 2 as a noun or a concept of hospitality. But the main word that we're talking about is actually a compound word, and if you were to break it down into its components, it suggests the meaning of being a friend to a stranger. So you see those familiar things, philo, xenia, where we get things like xenophobia, strangerphobia, sort of things. But it's this idea of being a friend to a stranger. And so here's a definition from one of the standard dictionaries, really, to define what this word in the New Testament is. And this one is geared primarily toward translators. So if you were to translate these concepts, It's to receive and show hospitality to a stranger, that is someone who is not regarded as a member of the extended family or a close friend. It's easy to have family over. It's easy to have your immediate inner circle of friends over. But as you start going out from that, it's not as easy. And that is really what this idea is focused on, is being a friend to the stranger. And so when we think about this, that is the main concept that we're talking about. So according to the dictionaries, the words themselves include being welcoming to strangers, which basically means those who are not family or close friends. Our English word that we use to correspond to this, so hospitable or hospitality, just means friendly and welcoming to strangers or guests, if you were to Google that. So it's that same idea of being friendly and welcoming. And at the outset, I want to suggest that as you look at the definitions and these different examples, the focus is not on a particular action. Hospitality is not on a particular action, but it's the attitude that produces those actions. So when we're talking about hospitality, we're really talking about an attitude, a condition of the heart. And so let's look at the main cases where this is used to see how that is reflected. And so first, the word hospitable is used in contexts that mark it as a characteristic of mature and fruitful disciples. So if you look in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2 here, as an example, it's also in Titus chapter 1. Those are chapters that we usually associate with the qualifications of overseers of the church. But it says here, therefore an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach. And so hospitable, it's that idea, that word that we're talking about. If you were to go to Titus 1:8, it says, but to not be these bad things, but hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. And so these are uses here referring to the qualities of a church elder, as we usually think. And what's the full picture of these qualifications or these characteristics? This is what is supposed to be of every Christian, right? And what is being marked out about these particular individuals is that they are mature and fruitful disciples, and that they're examples to the flock. And so we see first that hospitality is a mark of mature disciples. It's something that is expected if there's fruitfulness. In general, the characteristics in those passages we see mark those men out as mature, fruitful disciples who are examples to other people. And they have these characteristics that others are supposed to have. And so included in that, hospitality is a distinguishing mark of those people. And it's also reflective of the use of a related word, not the same word, in a different context in 1 Timothy 5, where it's talking about widows. And it says, if she's done all of these things, including being hospitable, then she's eligible to be supported. And part of it is, if she's been a mature and fruitful disciple, including being hospitable to people, then she can be included in this. But not only is hospitality or a hospitable heart for the older and more mature, but it's expected of all believers, as these following passages show. So go to 1 Peter chapter 4. I'll have these on the screen here, but what James read for us a while ago, 1 Peter 4, and then we're going to look at Romans 12:13 also. And so focusing on verses 8 through 10 of 1 Peter 4, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. And then it goes on to say, whatever your gift is, use it to serve each other, because that's what God wants. In Romans 12 and verse 13, if we're to turn there, I do have these on the screen, but I do want to turn to them. Romans chapter 12 and verse 13. This is in the context of a list of different things that people can use to serve each other. In Romans 12:13, it says, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. And my Bible has a heading of the marks of a true Christian there. You might have something to that effect. So it's talking about love, be genuine, abhor what's evil, hold fast to what's good, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo each other in showing honor. So it's all of these things that are marks of true and genuine disciples. And part of that is contributing to the needs of the saints and being hospitable to one another. And so you see, especially from these, this is an expected thing. And I think that was probably new to me when I was studying for this, is I never had thought about it in those terms of, yeah, it's a good thing, but it's actually expected of us. That this is something that God wants us to do. The verse in 1 Peter 4, is what initially caught my attention about this when we were doing our reading a few weeks ago. Where I was reading through it and I thought, oh man, that does not make me feel good when I read that as a homebody and an introvert, right? That sometimes I do want to complain about it because you know what? It taxes me to have you guys in my house sometimes. But it's a good thing. It's an expected thing. We're directed to keep loving and serving each other, and part of this is being willing to show hospitality to each other. And probably the reason that Peter is talking about that is because it's easy to resent it. It's easy to feel put out or put upon when we're taking care of other people. But 1 Peter is showing us that it's about an attitude. It's not just about the actions, it's about an attitude. It's about loving, it's about serving, and that's what we needed to focus on. And so, in addition to it being a mark of mature disciples, it's expected toward each other, that we need to be hospitable toward one another. So remember, we've already talked about that it's not just a particular action, it's an attitude that we're supposed to have, welcoming and friendship and fellowship and those things. And that's really the concept of hospitality. But remember, when we looked at those definitions and how the word is used, what we're talking about doesn't stop at friends here or in other churches. So the concept actually reaches out further than that, and the expectation goes out further than just us doing it to each other, because it's about being the friend to a stranger. And there are certain passages that indicate why. And so Hebrews 13:2 is one of those. So Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2. So I have here on the screen the New American Standard because, no offense to anybody, but the ESV puts unawares at the end of the verse, which I don't feel like fits with how they've done the rest of the verse, so I thought, I'm not going to use that one. But so Hebrews 13:2 says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. So in all these contexts, of course, these people they're undergoing mistreatment, and he's encouraging them not to give up their faith and all kinds of things. He says, let brotherly love continue, and do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. It's this idea of being a friend to a stranger here. And the word entertain, actually, in verse 2, is from the same root as hospitality, referring to strangers. So taking in someone as a stranger, and it literally means to receive someone as a guest into your home. And so this is talking about welcoming, entertaining, and bringing in people who may not be your close friends. And whether these strangers are Christians or non-Christians is a debated thing. It depends on what academics you're reading. So we want to be careful not to push that too far in either direction, although I don't believe it changes much either way about what we're saying. That this is talking about bringing in those who are not our closest friends and our family, or even our closest friends from other churches. But this is including the strangers and the foreigners and things to that extent. And part of that is because I believe it fits with other concepts that are used in the New Testament where this word is not used, but the idea is there. So you can think of the Good Samaritan. That's all about hospitality. He doesn't bring him into his house for dinner, but he welcomes him as his neighbor and takes care of him, and that's hospitality. Or in Matthew 25, where Jesus talks about, I was a stranger and you welcomed me and you fed me and you gave me drink. That's talking about hospitality. And remember that this was people that were not friends of theirs. And they thought, when did we ever see this? Again, another one, Galatians 6:10, not as directly related, but where it says, let us do good to everyone, and especially those of the household of faith. So the tendency can be for us to limit this to the church because that's a lot more comfortable. But when we look at the New Testament, and I think also their cultural context, it's clear that this is not just limited to the church. That this is welcoming the stranger and the downtrodden and those who are less fortunate. And it was really, really culturally significant to them. It's strange culturally for us more so today. So one author named Donald Guthrie explained it this way, and he said, in the Middle East, hospitality is a means of friendship. So to invite a person to a meal is to extend fellowship to them. So what was included for them when they brought someone in, the meal is not really the big thing. It's the attitude of welcoming and including and being a friend, because what they do, they'd bring them in and they'd wash their feet and they'd provide them with a towel and they would feed them, and all of these things that you pick up from the different details of when someone's a guest in someone else's house in the New Testament. And so this is about being a friend to someone. That's what really hospitality is, being a friend. And as we've seen, it's not just about friends and family. It's not just mature disciples. It's expected of all of us, but also toward outsiders or strangers, those who are not in our immediate circles. And that seems to be the idea of what hospitality is in the New Testament. It's about being a friend to others, to outsiders, to be welcoming, to be inviting, to extend friendship and fellowship to them. So we can put that together, and I want you to compare this. So when you think about being hospitable or hospitality, what image comes to your mind? So probably for most of us, it is you're welcoming someone into your house and you sit down for dinner, right? But if we've been talking about, it's more than that. We probably think of having people over for dinner. So when we combine the sense of our English word and these original language words, having someone over for dinner is not the sole focus. It's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. So in the social context of the Christians that we're looking at in those verses, in Hebrews and so on, it was about receiving people and taking them in and providing for them. That was often done toward travelers or teachers coming from other places. And that might be what Hebrews is talking about, is welcoming teachers who were strangers to them. Food was part of that, but it was not the whole thing. It was about fellowship and friendship. And that is what is being extended. And so what that means is being hospitable does not equal directly having people over for dinner. It's more than that, but it's not less than that. So having people over for dinner is included, but it's bigger than that also. Remember, it's about an attitude. It's about friendship and fellowship. So being hospitable is to have a welcoming and generous attitude toward others, toward the stranger, as we see explicitly in the words. So especially those people who are not our friends and our family. And I think Jesus sort of solidifies what we're talking about. And so one quotation of something that Jesus said to someone, I think really solidifies what we're discussing. And so he was invited to someone's house, and he used this opportunity to talk about different parables of banquets. And he said also to the man who had invited him, when you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and be repaid. And we understand that Jesus sometimes spoke in hyperbole, and he's not saying you're not allowed to invite your friends over for dinner, right? But when you give a feast, invite the poor and the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. So Jesus doesn't use the word, right? We see clearly that this is the concept. And he says that your hospitality should be focused on people who cannot pay you back. The stranger and the downtrodden and the less fortunate. So why would this attitude of welcoming and this receptive friendliness be provided as an assumed mark of true believers? Why would Jesus say that it should be focused in this way? And I want to put it directly, it's because that is how God has treated us in Christ. That is what hospitality is about. That is how God has treated us. He's welcomed us in, and He's received us, and He's provided for us even when we were strangers. And so this is part of what Jesus is talking about here. And He makes it clear in those parables, you've received this gift and you need to extend it to other people. So that right there is why, part of why this is so straightforward and valuable in shining our light to other people, because it's reflecting the literal gospel in our own lives. That this is what God has done for me, and so I am going to do it in a way for you also. To bring you in, to welcome you, to extend friendship, even when you cannot return the favor. And that is what is at the heart of it. See, it's an attitude. It's not about a particular action, like having someone over for lasagna. It is about the heart. And so, here's where I really want to hone in our focus about this. So we've talked about hospitality and what it means and sort of the focus and examples on it. But hospitality, if we're looking at it, is shining our light to people. And that's what I want us to think about. We see clearly the command to be hospitable to each other, and that's easy to see. But we need to be opening up our lives and our homes to each other and other people. So we can see in the New Testament that our hospitality is also to be directed toward outsiders. It's an opportunity to connect with others and to show them the light of Christ. And from my own personal experience, it's an extremely, extremely powerful way of doing it. To extend friendship in the way that He did to us. And so hospitality is having an attitude of openness and welcome toward others, and that makes it a powerful tool for sharing the gospel, or as we would say, evangelism. And I'm not saying, we're not talking about that you need to walk down the street and invite the first person that you see into your house. That's not what we're talking about, obviously. But be welcoming and willing to serve those that you have an opportunity to serve. So maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it is sort of a friend, but you don't know them that well. Maybe it's somebody who walks in these doors. All of these kinds of people that are not part of those inner circles, that are the strangers, those are those that we have an opportunity to serve. And to that end, hospitality is not just about welcoming people into our homes. It includes that. But it can also be about welcoming them among us as we worship God. So we have an opportunity to be hospitable here when people come to join us for worship. How we receive them will say a lot about our attitudes and our hearts and how the gospel is working in us, right? If we're not hospitable, they're not going to want to come back. But if we extend that friendship, if we are welcoming to the stranger in that way, that is where, the only way I can think to say it is, that's where the magic happens. And I hope you understand what I mean by that. So what are some examples of how to put this into practice? Because we can talk about it abstractly, but then trying to think about, okay, how do I actually do this can be a little bit more difficult. So just some to get you sort of brainstorming about this. Inviting someone out to coffee is hospitality. Saying, hey, would you want to sit down and have coffee sometime? That is a great first step. That is being welcoming and extending that friendship and that fellowship. Or inviting someone to tag along with you to an event or a gathering where there's going to be other Christians there. So that combines something that we've talked about months ago of, merging your universes, of bringing your non-Christian friends and your Christian friends together, but also welcoming and including them in activities where there are other Christians there. That's hospitality. Obviously, inviting someone over to your house for coffee or for dinner, and it doesn't always need to be a big production. In fact, it can often be more beneficial if you say, hey, do you want to come over for pizza on Friday? That's much less intimidating. As a young person, if you want to invite me over for a 3-course meal, I'm going to be a little more, what do I wear? Which fork am I going to use? That kind of thing. It doesn't have to be this built-up thing that we think about it. So sometimes just inviting someone over for pizza, And as we said, inviting and welcoming someone to our worship services or our other functions, including them in that and extending that friendship, that is the attitude of hospitality. So we have a visitor or somebody that we're studying with, and we say, hey, do you want to tag along to that? And oftentimes, when you extend that invitation, what I found, and I'm sure most other people find this too, they're a little bit surprised that, wait, really? I can come to that? And that's where you start to see this, that otherness of hospitality in our culture. And that brings up, we're talking about these examples, but why is this sometimes so hard? Why is it uncomfortable? And really, if we examine our culture, it's because our culture is isolated. And we're disconnected. And we thrive on make-believe connection on things like social media, where we get these sort of false sense of community, but it's not really real community. And so we try to trick ourselves into thinking that we have these relationships and we're being hospitable and welcoming to each other, but it's a proxy. It's not real. So our culture is isolated and disconnected. Just think about when someone rings your doorbell. I am never happy about answering the door when my doorbell rings. Part of that is my age. I know that used to be people could go door to door, but today we just do not want people coming into our space. This is my sanctuary and you need to stay away, is oftentimes how we feel about it. Opening up to others is uncomfortable, and having people over is vulnerable. What if they see that my house is messy, or that there's this hole in the wall that I haven't fixed yet, or that our kids are nuts, or whatever it is. And that can be uncomfortable. But I want to make this extremely clear. The fact that it is so different and odd is precisely what makes it such a good opportunity to share the gospel. Because hospitality is so different from the way that our culture operates and thinks, that is what makes it such a powerful opportunity to shine our lights. And I think that's part of what we see in the New Testament also. It demonstrates that there's something different about these people, that they're willing for me to come into their lives, and that they're allowing me to share and to have friendship with them. And people notice that. They notice when you're willing to let them in, because we don't really do that in our culture nowadays, unless it's our friends and our extremely close family. So hospitality is an opportunity to shine our light. And it's something that we can all do in different ways, right? Because we tend to get scared and think, my house is too small, I live by myself, whatever, but there are ways that we can all practice this attitude of welcoming and being a friend. And we just have to look up for what they are. And so God both encourages and expects us to be hospitable. And while we typically narrow that to the meal sort of thing, Scripture shows us that it's about the attitude of our hearts and being willing to extend the favor of God that He showed to us, to where we offer friendship and fellowship to other people. And it's powerful because it's so different from the norm. It's not how people behave. And if they do behave that way, it's sort of just a show. That we're nice to people, but we don't have a follow-through in our culture. And so it provides the opportunity to shine Christ's light to others and to share what we've been given. So really our call to action, our homework for this, is just to look for opportunities to pursue an attitude of welcoming others. Look for opportunities where I can extend and be a friend in the way that Christ was to me, to reach out his hand and to take me in. So as I said before, everyone here is part of our family, and we need to be looking for these opportunities. If there is something that you need to bring before the family here, or something that you need to ask for help with, then as you know, you have opportunity at any point, but you also have the opportunity now while Stan leads us in this song.